Look, this is incredibly tough, all of this. I mean, we keep saying, we've said all week, what an inbox to be faced with when you move into number 10. However, I think, there's been a sort of sense of calm, at least. It feels like there is at last a hand on the rudder. What's your assessment of how this week's gone?
I think that's right, and I think a calm has descended across, hopefully, the country, whether you were a supporter of the Conservatives, whether you're a supporter of the government, whether you're a supporter of Rishi. I think people are pleased that there's a Prime Minister that is in place, someone that has been the Chancellor in quick succession and can get on and deal with the difficult decisions that have got to be taken. I think there was a long period where the government was obviously in a state of flux under Liz Truss's sort of administration, but I think now we can get back to being boring.
In fact, it was your old boss, wasn't it, Michael Gove, who said boring is back. But you wouldn't think so if you read the newspapers. They're always looking for new angles, and of course they're talking about Liz Truss's phone being hacked and things like that. But in amongst all this calm, there is still this idea that there is this still willingness to knock whoever's in. And at the moment, he is getting it, isn't he? He's being attacked for his wealth. He's being attacked for perhaps taking donations from companies that are investing in fossil fuels, for instance, and oil.
Not going to COP.
And not going to COP. And is that the reason he's not going to COP? So we're still getting at him.
I think so. And that's inevitable, I think, in politics, particularly when you're at the very top. But I think there are decisions that the media and the opposition will have to make. How do you how do Labour try and maintain their lead in the polls? How do they attack politically Rishi? And as you say, it's about his wealth and his shoes and maybe the suits that he wears. But I think if you attack somebody's wealth, ultimately as a political tactic, it's a bit cheap because ultimately you don't choose what your parents are, what wealth you're born into, and you don't choose who you love if you marry into wealth. So as a party that wants to be open, innovative, pro-business, it has to work out itself whose side is it on, who's it supporting.
What do you make of the messaging coming out of number 10, though? Because it is pretty negative at the moment. Interestingly, Stuart's been in touch, says we're a grown-up nation and don't think the information coming from number 10 is too negative. I guess he just means we need realism at the moment in all of this. I mean, is it all about expectation management ahead of November the 17th?
I think so. I think a previous guest that you had on was talking about the property markets, and there seems to be this current reassurance between the Hunt and the Rishi factor. And I think that's right. And, I think that's reflected in the polls. The Conservative Party seems to be clawing back day by day. I mean, he's only been in the job for 4 or 5 days. So let's see what happens in the next 4 or 5 weeks, the 4 or 5 months, and then beyond. So I think there is that reassurance. But, yes, there has to be that element of expectation management. The way in which Rishi went into number 10, we saw there wasn't the usual sort of applause, the clap of everybody surrounding him, because he wanted to set the tone for the country that this is a very, very serious moment, and he's going to take this opportunity to level with the public, to say, look, mistakes have been made over the last 2 months. We've probably got to go further than what we might have done because of the way the mini-budget didn't instill confidence in the market. So this is a really, really serious moment. We've all got to do our bit, and it is setting that expectation management, as you say, Steve.
I mean, we were talking about the stress of being inside number 10 at the moment, of being the Prime Minister, and it must be incredibly stressful because, as we know, the Prime Minister at the moment has various different audiences he has to appeal to. How do you think he's going down at the moment with the Tory bigwigs, the people who really hold the power within the Conservative Party?
Well, I think, as I said, I think everybody was pleased that we didn't have a leadership election that would be going on until Friday. So, we could have had another week of the psychodrama of the infighting and the public sort of disputes between two candidates. So I think having somebody that was able to command the confidence of its Conservative backbenchers installed in quick succession was a good thing. I think, obviously, there is a lot of weight on his shoulders because being a former Chancellor, and when it is the economy that is the number one issue, there is that expectation that he will come in and deliver and, as I say, regain that momentum in the polls and see the Conservatives progress and do better than what it currently has been.
Do you think it's a sign of tensions, though, already between... And, I'm not trying to cause trouble. It's just you do wonder, though, the fact that the autumn statement has been put back from tomorrow, which was meant to be till November the 17th, is that a sense that him and Jeremy Hunt actually aren't necessarily agreeing on how to move this forward?
I don't think so. I think The irony is that I think the 17th of November was the original date that Kwasi Kwarteng wanted, but because of the way in which the mini-budget sort of appeared and its fallout, they had to move that forward to the 31st to try and instil that bit of confidence. So moving it back, I think, is the right thing to do, because it just allows the Chancellor and the Prime Minister to really understand the figures, get under the car bonnet to see in every sort of sector in public life what we can do, where savings might need to be made, or where actually, as a compassionate Conservative government, that's the language that's coming out from Number 10, where actually you can go as far as you possibly can to protect the most vulnerable and the services that you need to. But I think having that time to consider all these factors and deliver that on the 17th of November is the right thing.
Does that play into Rishi's hands, the compassionate side of it? Look, we've had a lot of views in this morning, and we always do when it comes to furlough and things like this. And Michael said the black hole is all down to the much too generous furlough scheme. Right, I mean, there are arguments, pro and cons over furlough and how it was done. However, for a lot of people, it was an absolute lifeline, and people who aren't Conservative voters. Does that then put Rishi in a better light? Does he seem like a more compassionate Conservative from the perspective of people who don't really vote Conservative?
I think that's totally right, and I think. Some of the conversations that we're having within the Conservative Party, there were people that, weren't particularly happy with that approach and thought it was too much state intervention. And, that's why Liz was going for growth and wanted tax cuts immediately to move away from the state having too much of a say. Now, obviously, that spooked the markets and, obviously wasn't what the country asked or wanted or needed, frankly. So going back to someone that, as you say, has intervened in the past, that supported jobs and wages through furlough, doing the same again where it's needed, helping the most vulnerable, where we're seeing a cost of living crisis, when you're seeing daily goods on the rise, people protecting people's mortgages and pensions. I think that's why there's that confidence that's been temporarily reinstilled, so let's hope it's maintained.
I've been wondering all this time why so much of what comes out of Number 10 at the moment seems to be so negative. It's all about what he's not going to have. Every time he opens his mouth, it seems to me, he's warning us that things are going to be tough and he's got to make tough decisions. Do you think that the budget is going to be even tougher? We're being sort of warmed up for really bad news.
I'm not entirely sure. I think, obviously, given the situation that we've come from, you have to be in a position where you're looking as though you're in control, and because obviously the last administration wasn't necessarily, it didn't appear that they were in total control.
Diplomatic.
Well, the optics were bad, weren't they? That's for sure.
So I think being able to regain that confidence within the public and in the financial services sector, you've got to go a bit further to say that things might be looking difficult. They will be difficult, and we've all got to recognise that, but we've all got to find ways to make it work. And so having a leader that can level with the public, deliver on that outcome, I think is going to be the way forward.